This studio is fake. Now you can't see it right now, but if I start waving my hand here, you can see the illusion falling apart. And if I remove this, and this, first of all, you can see the nasty electric board on my wall. And if I show you the size that was captured on the camera originally, then you realize that I artificially expanded the frame of this video and made it look as an expensive YouTube studio. And if I wanted, I could switch to a completely different setup. So, if your room sucks and you want to change it to a YouTube studio like this one, this is the video you don't want to miss. Hello, I'm the Digital Alchemist, also known as Kcinho, but you can call me K. And today I'm going to give you 4 simple steps to go from this to this. But before I show you, please know that the tools I'm using don't really matter that much. What's really important is the techniques I'm going to outline in this tutorial, because new tools come up every day, especially in the world of AI. So what's really important is that you learn the technique and learn how to replicate it. And if you stick until the end of this video, I will give you tips to drastically speed up the whole process. Step 1. Set up your scene and shoot the video. So the first step is to set up your scene, and your setup does not necessarily need to be fancy. But there are key principles that you must respect if you want this to work. First, your camera is not allowed to move during the whole video, so it's best to use a tripod and not move the camera around, otherwise it's not gonna work. Also, make sure you don't make drastic changes to the elements that appear on screen. Actually, it's better if you don't touch them at all. For example, I have this mount here with the microphone and the laptop here, so I'm not gonna touch this for the entirety of the video. Well, I mean, I can touch it as long as I don't move it. Next, make sure you have consistent lighting. Now, you don't need to have fancy lighting like I have, but you need consistent lighting. So shut down the curtains and use artificial lighting so that it doesn't change, because the slightest change of light can really make the whole illusion fall apart. So you've been warned, but I will give you additional tips on that topic later in this video. So if you respected these key principles, you can now start shooting your video. Step 2. Export and AI. Next, I'm going to open my video editing tool. Now I'm using Final Cut Pro, but you can use a free alternative like CapCut or DaVinci Resolve. But whatever tool you are using, we're going to use the export feature to export just one frame as a PNG file. Now in my case, I have a clip here on my timeline, so this is the first frame and this is the image I got out of my camera. And it's fine, but I want to artificially expand the whole frame. I want to make it look bigger, like the studio is bigger. So the first thing we need to do for that technique, I'm going to select my clip, and then here I have the scale, and I'm going to change the scale. Now I know the scale because I've been doing that a lot. You can pick up pretty much any scale. Mine is around 70. More precisely is 70,76. Now don't ask me why 76. Now that doesn't really matter. What really matters is that you shrink the frame so that you have enough space around and that eventually it will look like you have a bigger studio setup. And don't worry, it will all make sense in a moment. Alright, so now I can export the frame. So what I'm going to do is click here on this icon, click on Save Current Frame, click on Next, and I'm just going to save that frame on my hard drive. Next, I'm going to open this file in Photoshop. And once again, if you want a free alternative, I believe there is a free version of Adobe Firefly that you can test. But like I said, there are other tools. Now, if you have Photoshop, it's even better. Just follow along. So in Photoshop, I'm just going to make a selection with the selection tool. So I'm not going to go straight at the edges. I'm going to do it like this. Maybe just for the bottom part, I'm closer to the edge. But for the other parts, I'll be like this. And now I'm going to invert the selection. So on the Mac is Command plus S plus I. So now it's selecting the opposite of what I just selected. Now I'm just going to click here on Generative Fill. And next I'm just going to click on Generate. And now let's wait and relax. Should just take a few seconds. All right, so this is the first result, right? And if I click here, I see I have variations. So let me try the second variation. Oh, that's much better. Third variation. So second variation is definitely something I can use right out of the box. So I'm going to pick this one. Now the next step, I want to hide that ugly electric board. Sorry, didn't mean to offend you, electric board, but I'm just going to select it. And then once again, generative fill, generate. And let's wait and see. And there you go, completely vanished. Just one click. So that's awesome. So now we have that foundation, I can start building on it. So for example, let me make a selection here and then generative fill, and I'm going to prompt poster frame. And there you go. I have variations. And as you can imagine, I can just do it all over on the wall. I can add lamps, I can add a lot of stuff. Now, as you may imagine, I already have a version that I use for most of my videos. So let's take a look. So in this version, instead of hiding the electric board, what I did is I added some poster frames, like I just showed you, but now I have 5 poster frames. And from there, I added logos. So now it's starting to take shapes, looking really nice. And the final touch, what I did is I just duplicated this folder called frames. Then I rasterized it using shortcut Command E on the Mac and I guess Control E on the PC. And then I went to filter, blur, Gaussian blur. And here you have to play with the values to test what's working, but basically I want to blur the background so it makes it look like it's natural. Because if you're using a camera that has any depth of field, then you want to mimic that depth of field, also called bokeh or tone, if you are a fan of Camera Conspiracy's channel. But basically we're going to artificially blur the background. So here let me try with 2. And there it is. Now you may not see it, especially if you're looking on a small screen, but let me zoom in. So here we can see that's the blurred version and this is the non-blurred version. So if you're watching this on a high-end screen on your mobile phone or on a desktop, you should see the difference. So this is not blurred and this is blurred. So this is what we want and it will make the whole thing look more realistic. Now with this technique, I can completely change the studio setup. For example, here it's very minimalist. And then we have this one. Here I have a lamp, I have a poster frame, I have some shelves, I can add some bottles. Basically, sky is the limit. All you need to do is learn how to prompt, but it's super easy. And honestly, learning how to prompt should be one skill you're aiming to master. But that's a topic for another video. Alright, so back to our file. Now we want to export this image. So of course, make sure you save your file first, but then we want to export this image. Now you could go to File and then Save As or Save as a copy, but I found that when I did this and exported it as a PNG, there was a difference in color between this image and the color space of my camera. So personally, I found that the best way to do it is just to go to File, Export, and then choose Save for Web, which is Legacy. Now there's probably another way to do it, but for now this works. So let me click on Save for Web and now I can save it. But before I save it, make sure it's PNG. So I choose PNG 24 and I keep transparency. It's not important for this one, but it's important for the next one. Then click on Save, select where you want to save it on your computer and hit Save. And now the next step is that I use the same prompting technique to add foreground elements. So here, for example, I have aloe vera leaves in the foreground. I also added palm tree leaves. So the next step is I'm going to unselect all the elements except from the foreground elements. And now once again, I'm going to go to File, Export, Save for Web, still PNG, make sure transparency option is selected, hit Save, find a spot on your hard drive and hit the Save button. Now the reason why we want to separate the elements from the background and the foreground is because we want that illusion. But you see what I mean in a moment. Step 3, import and mask. So we're back in Final Cut Pro and I'm going to use the import feature. So I'm going to use a shortcut, Command plus I on a Mac, I guess Control plus I on a Windows or Linux PC. Then I'm going to select the file I just edited in Photoshop and click on Import Selected. And I'm also going to repeat the process for the foreground elements, like the aloe vera leaves, for example. So next, I'm going to detach the audio. So I right click, hit Detach Audio. And next, let me drag the file that we edited in Photoshop. So I'm just gonna drag it here and I'm going to extend it for the whole length of the clip. So now if I try to play, nothing happens. That's because this is a fixed image. So we need to use what is called a mask. Basically, I'm just going to mask one part of the image and let the video come through in the other part. It's all gonna make sense. So here, let me open the effects and I'm going to look for masks and keying, and I'm going to use draw mask. So I'm just gonna drag it on my image. So this is my image here. And I'm going to start adding control points. Now you could use just a rectangular mask, but I find it better to just use control points. Super easy, just look. So I'm gonna start here, here, here. I'm gonna go around the frame. All right. And I'm going to guesstimate where it stops, but you can easily adjust it. So you see, this is the mask. We're going to invert it, but first let's use this mask. You see, if I move this around, you can see part of the fixed image. So I'm just gonna go back here and adjust. So this really depends on your setup, but right here it seems to be working fine, and I can always adjust. With the technique I'm gonna show you, you can adjust it. Even when you're finishing editing the video, you can still adjust it easily. All right, next I'm just going to add a feather that's gonna make the edges smoother. So I'm going to put -60, and it's just going to make the whole thing seamless. Next, I'm going to select invert mask. Thank you for this loud motorbike while I'm trying to make a tutorial for YouTube. Really? So I can adjust, and once I'm happy, I can move on to the next phase. And the next phase is adding the foreground elements. So first of all, let me close this. And I'm gonna start dragging the file. So this is aloe vera. So as you can see, it's starting to take shape. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to copy this file and just paste it. So now I have two. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to shift it. So I'm just going to shift it slightly, make it lower to make it more dense. Now let me add another one, palm leaves. Once again, let me extend it to the length of the clip. And now I also have palm leaves here. So let me turn it off so you see the difference. I can also lower it. So I'm going to play with the positioning. Great, looking good. So next, I'm going to select all these layers except from the audio. And I'm going to create what is called a compound clip. So basically, I'm going to wrap all of this in a group, in a folder if you prefer, but it's called a compound clip in Final Cut Pro. So for that, I'm going to use the shortcut Alt+G. Let me just call it my clip and hit OK. So now everything is in one clip, and that's super important for the next step. Step 4, add realism. So to make the illusion come alive, we're going to use what is called a LUT. Basically, we're going to color the whole clip. Because right now you can kind of see that the leaves are fake, and that distracts from the whole illusion we're trying to create. Now you can easily find free LUTs online, especially if you go to these filmmaking YouTube channels. Most of the creators have free LUTs. Of course, they also have paid ones, but they almost all have some free LUTs, and you can find loads online. Just Google is going to be your friend. So here I'm going to open the effects panel once again. Let me type LUT. And there you go, custom LUT. So I'm just gonna drag it on my clip. And here I already have a few pre-installed. So for example, you can see this one, this one, this one. Well, you get the idea. So very easily you can change the whole mood and make the whole thing look way more realistic. Now, personally, I use another tool, and this is not sponsored, I'm not trying to sell you anything, just showing you what I love. And basically, this other tool is doing kind of the same thing, but the difference is that it's really tailored to your camera if you have a compatible camera with this tool. So the tool is called Film Convert, but don't sweat it. If you just want to use LUTs, it's completely fine. And actually, the tool I'm using, at the end of the day, it's also a LUT. But like I said, just tailored to my camera. So let me just remove the LUT. So I'm just going to delete this. And now I'm going to look for film emulation. And there it is, Film Convert Nitrate. Then I'm just going to open controls and select the camera. Select the right color profile. And now I can stop playing. I'm going to remove the grain effect. And I'm just going to change the exposure. And here I can also change the LUTs basically. But like I said, it's going to be really tailored to my camera. Okay, so this is the final settings that I came up with. And if I put it in full screen, there you go. All right, let me get out of here. And next I can add effects. So for example, I'm just going to cut this clip and let me duplicate it. So for example, here I can add a Ken Burns effect. So now if I play the clip, you can see I have this zoom out effect. Next, let me select this clip. Let me do the Ken Burns again, but this time it's a zoom in effect. And basically in Final Cut Pro, you can just click on this icon here to switch between zoom in and zoom out. So as you can see, it's pretty slick. Let me put it full screen. And as you can see, it looks way more realistic. Next, I can also use a different tool. So I can use the transform tool. I'm going to change the size of the canvas, and then I can just zoom in like this. And that allows me to go from a scene like this to completely zoom in. And now if I want to show something on screen, I can just use the tools in my video editor to manipulate that image. And now you can see this bubble here, and I can place it on the other side. Basically, sky is the limit, and now it looks very realistic because you can switch from this bubble and this bubble to this scene, and it all looks seamless and natural. So as you can see, all of this gives the illusion of a very professional studio setup. When the reality is, if I remove the foreground elements, the background elements, if I revert back to the original size of the frame, and if I remove the LUT, this is now a very boring image with an ugly electric board. Sorry, electric board. Nah, I prefer this, right? Next, a few tips. And the first tip is to use templates. Because yes, you need to do this process for every video, because like I said, if the lighting changes or any element in the frame, like the microphone or the laptop changes, you need to redo it again. So using templates is literally the difference between working hours on your fake studio setups or just a couple of minutes. So here, for example, I have this template, and all I need to do is here just select this shape here and then hit generative fill, and that's it. And for the rest, so let me deselect this. For the rest, all I need to do is add my frames, and voila, I can add the leaves. I actually have the leaves already ready on a PNG file, so I don't need to re-export it all the time. All I do is export the main frame, and that's it. It takes me a couple of minutes now. Now, while I was creating it, took me a long time, but lucky you, I'm trying to save you a lot of time here. Next, remove variations. So if you recall at the beginning of this video, we started testing with this image. I added this frame, and as you can see, we have 3 variations. But if you know you don't like the other variations, just delete it. So I'm going to delete those 2, which I don't like, and that's going to keep the file size down because the file size can quickly add up. So you're going to save some disk space with this tip. Now, if you don't want to use foreground elements and you want a very minimal studio setup like this one, it is possible, as you can see, but you need to be very wary where you place your hands, and you need to make sure you don't cross the illusion line. So for example, here I crossed the line. So if you're using this minimal setup, no foreground elements, yeah, the illusion is lost. But if I stick here and I remember during the video, hey, I need to be aware of my hands and not cross this line, stay like this, then I'll be fine. And my last tip is about frame rates and lighting, and I'm still trying to work this out. But basically, lighting and frame rates, I don't want to get too technical here, but one of my friends had issues because the lights were flickering. So if the light flicker, then the whole illusion falls apart. The thing is, he's in Europe. So basically, he was trying to shoot 24 frames per second, but the frequency of the light should be matched with 25 frames per second if you're in Europe. In the US, for example, it will be 24 frames per second. Otherwise, you would have the opposite effect. If you try to use 25 frames per second in the USA with the electricity frequency, you would get the flicker. So long story short, 25 frames per second if you're in Europe, 24 frames per second if you are in the USA, and if you are anywhere else in the world, you need to look this up, and Google is going to be your friend, but at least you know this is fixable. Now, don't get me started with real 24 FPS or not. That's one of the issues I have. My camera shoots in 23.98 instead of 24 frames per second. And that 0.02 can cause some issues too, but that's a story for another video. Now, I don't know about you, but I find this super exciting because just think about it. Not too long ago, if you didn't have fancy equipment and fancy furniture, then either you had to compromise with a mediocre room setup, or you had to revert to a green screen, which means more equipment, and the end result is not always that good. But now, with just AI and the technique I showed you today, you can go from looking like this, mediocre, to looking like this, like a big player. So if you plan on using this technique, please let me know in the comments below what your YouTube channel is about. As for me, I'll see you in the next one. Yeah.